if your employer branding is not strong or is lacking in certain areas, you're essentially missing out on a whole pool of candidates. So I think to give you the best ability to essentially hire what you're looking for, it's really important to have good candidate experience, which ultimately does lead to employer branding. And on the flip side, if you have bad employer branding, you really struggle to bring good candidates in, even if you're an amazing recruiter.
Hello, Mert. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. So today's episode is with Mert Amcaoglu, and we will be talking about the topic candidate experience and why it matters. And it's a very interesting and important topic to my heart. But first, I would like to know why this topic is important to you.
Like I said, thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. Candidate experience, definitely super important for anyone in recruitment, whether that's external or internal. It's all about the journey we take the candidate through. And more than anything, I think why it's important to me is it's quite rewarding to find people new roles. Again, whether it's contractors, whether it's permanent, and bringing people or employees into your company. I think it's very rewarding. Getting someone all the way from advertisement all the way to making them your new hire. And I think it's also a great tool if you can really ensure your candidate experience is great. It's such a great tool, and it makes a lot of difference with the recruitment process.
For sure. I think also it it touches the various different topics, right? Like it's one thing to have a good candidate experience for the candidate,
Yeah.
but then in reverse, it kind of touches back on to your employer branding, right? How you look in the market and what the first touch point of the market is with your company. But then I think the other one is also um the the reputation that you kind of build. It sometimes is just a first impression, and it might not work out in that moment with that candidate, but you never know. It might open other doors later on, especially in a time where it's so difficult to find, candidates that are really suitable for your roles, because there's so much demand in so many different ways. So, what would you say, like from your perspective and your experiences, how does candidate experience really impact employer branding?
From an employer branding perspective, I mean, it has such a big impact. I mean, with candidate experience, it's really important to make sure it's a positive experience all the way from advertisement going out, or whether you're headhunting and reaching out to people. It's all about that first communication and that hook almost to what's going to make them want to work in your company. And I think it has such a big impact on, firstly, the quality of candidates that apply for the role. If your employer branding is not strong or is lacking in certain areas, you're essentially missing out on a whole pool of candidates. So I think to give you the best ability to essentially hire what you're looking for, it's really important to have good candidate experience, which ultimately does lead to employer branding. And on the flip side, if you have bad employer branding, you really struggle to bring good candidates in, even if you're an amazing recruiter and you have all the tools available.
Yeah.
It's just so hard if your branding is not there. You're fight. You're what's the word I'm looking for? You're just trying to climb a hill that keeps getting steeper.
Yeah, that's very true. Also, because like I'm thinking of myself, I also know from myself, but then also from candidates that sometimes they apply for any kind of role within a certain company just because they want to work for that company, regardless of the role,
Yep.
right? So I think that's also another perspective that we could look at on why it's really important. So what would you say are the biggest frustrations that candidates face when they go through an interview process?
Well, there's a variety of stuff that could really be a bad experience. I think the most important one, especially right now where it's a market where there's a lot of candidates available, I think just a lack of communications. Like if someone has applied for a role and you don't get back to him within a certain time frame, I think that's quite poor. there's so many ATSs now or CRMs that you use that are, fully automated. It doesn't take much to set this up. Whether it's, a positive feedback to move them to a screening call, or whether it's a negative impact, a negative feedback that, you don't want to move ahead with them because maybe there's better candidates in the pool. I think just even communicating that you will not be moving ahead with someone goes such a long way. And like you said, I think again that really starts to build like your brand. Like people will be aware, oh, okay, this company cares about the people that apply for their roles, even if they're replying and saying, we're not moving ahead at this stage. It's always a great idea to keep the door open because you never know, you might need this candidate 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line. I mean, I'm sure I know we've hired so many candidates that we've kept in touch with over the years, and I think and that's just starting from that communication that you constantly try to yeah be in
Yeah.
contact with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you do specifically to avoid that? Like you were talking about giving feedback, for example, to candidates on a timely manner. What would you say? Like, what are the things that you do to provide a good candidate experience?
Yeah, I mean, just for that first sort of point of contact when they've applied to a role, or you reach out to them by a headhunting method and you wanted to speak to them. um I think it's very important to give them a reason of, if you're not moving ahead, why. I think the why is very important. So we use Team Taylor as an ATS,
Mm.
and we've got a variety of reasons of why we potentially are not going ahead with this candidate. Whether it's, if it's a hybrid model and you need someone to be based in London, they're up in Liverpool, that's obviously not possible. So whether it's a location, whether it's salary, whether it's a specific industry they worked in that is maybe not relevant. So we always try to give a reason. So I think that's the first thing. And this also helps us when we're recruiting because, all of this is data. So we can go back and look at this data 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, or whatever in a year. And we can see, X number of percentage of the reasons why we didn't go ahead with a candidate was maybe because our salaries were too low. And then
Yeah.
that opens up another conversation of, is our salary bandings in the correct place? Is it to the expectations of the market? So you start to build, I guess, data from this communication. It works both ways because you're also providing them with a good candidate experience. But on the back end, you're building a lot of data that the talent team can use to make decisions.
Crucial. I
Yeah,
mean, this data is everything, especially if you want
exactly.
to improve. 100% agree. Um, Going back now to what you said with like the data and giving the reason. Funny enough, actually, just today I was rejecting someone and I called them up because what I usually do, and this is like my way of doing it, I when I'm in the first call with a candidate, I usually tell them uh, that if it's a positive next step, then they will receive an email or a call from me, and if it's a no, then they will receive a very boring message that it's not going ahead further, and that we give detailed feedback after the second stage. So this is like kind of the way I kind of manage expectation already.
Yeah,
With
exactly.
certain roles, what I also do is I tell them straight away in the first call, I have my weekly on Wednesday, whenever the day is. And if I don't come back to you by then it means it's a no. If it goes further, then I will call you. Like, when I like to, for example, high value hiring. And
Yeah,
so I have my different ways. And again, today I was calling someone after the third round and rejected them. And he was like, you could have just sent me an email. Why did you call me and tell me this? And wasting my time almost. So it's funny, like, sometimes we also think that people want to know, but
yeah,
I think that's also not the norm nowadays. Honestly, like
no,
and then you have other people that you do, call and they're really grateful that they actually do receive, you know,
yeah.
a
It's very hard. Like everyone's different, but I think just like you said, it's all about just setting the expectations. I mean, I'm sure, and you'll probably agree with me. we would all love to call candidates for every person who's applied, call them, reject them. But unfortunately, we won't have the time. We'll be on with the phone all day. So there are
Exactly.
certain times where at certain stages it does have to be just an email. But I agree, anyone post screening call, it would always be a phone call, whether it's positive or negative. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I think, and if you don't have the capacity for that, then what you can also do is just send an email still, but then offer that the opportunity for
To
the
provide
person
feedback. Yeah.
who can call afterwards if they wanted to have
Yeah.
more feedback.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's also an option, but it's funny like how the candidate experience really does differ, and it's not just like a one size fits all kind of approach actually.
Yeah.
Um,
It even differs from like the different departments in your company to the different levels. Yeah, it really does depend on the role. Yeah.
yeah. And would you say that like you also had some moments where you thought you were, doing something, for a candidate in your way that it was like a positive thing, but it went completely south? Like, do you have any kind of example of that, that you could share?
Maybe when I first started my recruitment career in an agency, staff group, shout out staff group. Um, uh, I think I gave I got feedback from a client, which then I passed on to the candidate, and it was a pretty harsh feedback. And I
Okay.
didn't filter it. I just
Ah,
almost forwarded it on, and I think there is a degree of of course, constructive criticism is good to a certain extent, but I do find there's probably a very fine line of
yeah,
what's harsh and what's not. And I'm not saying like you should edit the feedback. I'm just saying you almost. I think this comes with experience. You almost filter through what's relevant, what's going to help them improve,
yeah.
and then what's almost like not necessary in a sense.
Oh my God, 100 million% agree. I think I had to learn this also the hard way.
Yeah,
Very similar. And I think you just get used to, and I think, as you said, it comes with experience and time that you know exactly, okay, what is right to share and what isn't.
yeah,
Because certain things are also, between the lines. And I think also specifically maybe between the hiring manager and you, where they open up and tell you maybe certain things. But I think since we're in a professional environment, it's really about giving constructive feedback and things that are really helpful. Also because there's also this big topic involved always, and that's bias, right? So I think you can really not tell everything that you want to or that you've been told when it comes to feedback. So top tip to everyone who's listening and who's starting off as a recruiter, please don't share all the feedback.
yeah,
It can backfire
yeah.
for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Great. And what would you say is like the future of candidate experience? How should be the ideal candidate experience look like?
I mean, it's so hard to say what it would look like, but obviously with sort of the whole AI stuff everyone's talking about now, I think there'll be certain elements of applying for roles or the screening part where you can definitely utilize AI tools and make your process a lot more streamlined. I think one of the things candidates hate the most is a long, lengthy process that's not streamlined. So
Yeah.
how can you use this tech, this automation, this whatever it may be, AI, that can help you to improve efficiency, improve quality of candidates, improve the process. It might even be not related to the actual hiring side. It might be how can you use AI to dive into your recruiting data, and how can you you know make the recruitment needle, as they say, thicker and have more candidates. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it would look like, but I can see a lot of processes being a lot more streamlined,
Yeah.
automated, and yeah, I think that it will always have the human touch. I think we both know recruitment, won't exist without the human touch. I think we'll never be replaced by by robots. Um, but yeah, I think it will be a combination of both.
Hmm. Yeah. And big shout out to all the companies out there. I think for me, the most frustrating bit in a candidate as a candidate was always these, huge application forms that you had to fill in, where you have to upload your CV and then you have to fill in the exact same information
Oh,
in their website. I mean, like honestly, I remember I used to, like in the very beginning when I started applying, like there was one point where as soon as it wasn't an easy apply and I saw that there was like a long form, I would just stop applying. Like I
yeah,
just wouldn't anymore because, if you do that once or twice is okay, but if you're actively looking and you have to do that with almost every application, is so frustrating and it's so time consuming.
yeah,
And then sometimes you don't even get an answer from certain places. So
yeah,
honestly, like if I could ditch anything, that would be the first thing I would, if I
yeah.
could.
Absolutely. Likewise, when I was looking for a new role, and
Mhm.
I came across a website like that where you have to upload your CD and then fill in all the details after,
Yeah,
I simply closed the tab. Like,
literally.
I do not want to work for a company that
Yeah.
still thinks that's okay. Like,
Right? Especially not in an era of easy apply. Like, no.
no, on yeah,
And the CV. And then also now, like being on the other side, where you look at the CV, what, maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds maximum. Um, honestly, really don't need to have all the information double and triple for no reason. So I think that
yeah,
is my biggest pet peeve when it
yeah.
comes to, yeah,
I
the
pr- I
candidate.
prefer I prefer candidates who write a cover letter, whether
Mhm.
even if it's a paragraph or two. I think
Yeah,
that goes a really long way. That like helps their CV as well. I think having that personal touch, whether it might not even be a cover letter, it might be just a paragraph on the top of their
yeah,
CV, just explaining why they want to work for your company, and why they feel they're the best match for it or the good match for it. I think that goes a long way.
yeah. And what's your take on cover letters generally, like from a candidate experience? Do you think that's outdated, a cover letter? And I'm not talking about the paragraph, right? But as a company,
Yeah.
you expect your candidates or,
No, I mean, I think in my view, it always has to be optional. I
Mhm.
wouldn't make it mandatory because again, you're probably losing out on a lot of candidates who will, be like, okay, well, that's almost a blocker for me. I'll go apply to another role. That's easy apply, right?
Yeah.
So I think having it optional is always the best approach, especially today where it's so easy to apply for roles. But then I do feel like if someone is super interested in the role, why wouldn't they do it? Because
Mm.
I think it does potentially make them stand out. You know,
Yeah.
every roles now we're getting so many candidates applying, and I think it can make a difference if you- if
Yeah.
you if you go that one step further. But again, it really varies on the role, in the sector, in the industry, even in your department. It's a case by case. You can't say it's not one size fits all. I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like rather than a cover letter, I think if they would just give like an option to write like a couple of
Yeah.
sentences,
Yeah.
which is way more authentic and personal, I think, than a cover letter that is kind of, let's be honest, probably done for, like a template and then be just adjusted to each
Yeah.
company, which is obviously something that we all have done. And in an era of ChatGPT, I think it's way better to just do that. But as you said, like as an option, I think there are certain sectors and maybe even some roles where would make a difference to read
Yeah. Of
that.
course. Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
but generally, I don't think it should be mandatory to.
What we've
For an-
done, what we do here at Bark is we try to at least add like 2 or 3 questions per
Mhm.
role of like real key skills you need
Yeah,
to be able to do this role. So, for example, if I'm looking for a backend Python engineer,
yeah,
one of the questions would be is, do you have experience with Python, or how many years of
mhm,
experience with Python do you have, or not even necessarily years of experience, more like which projects have you worked on with Python? And if
mhm.
the answer is like, no, I haven't, or whatever it may be, then you already know that candidate is going to be no good. So again,
Yeah,
it's almost like it's a way of filtering
yeah,
on our side. And then it really does help like make the vast number of candidates applying, at least, some of them who are not relevant. Again, because it's so easy to apply, you do get some candidates who apply who are not relevant. It's just easy to filter through to get to the candidates who can really do the job and who can really, yeah, join and drive impact.
yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, I think that's way, way more efficient and helpful from both sides, right? Because
Yeah.
also if as a candidate, you get asked certain questions and you know that you don't have that skill or the experience, then you kind of know for yourself as well whether this is probably going forward or not. Do you know?
And-
Like I think
yeah.
it helps both sides. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think from an candidate experience perspective, relevant questions to ask relevant questions to the
Yeah.
role rather than asking to fill out the CV details back.
Yeah, exactly. And even if those candidates who are not relevant and they somehow get through and you screen them and then they have an interview, they're going
Yeah,
to be stressing the whole time because they obviously are not suitable for the job. So then why would you make them stressed almost to go through that process, which again leads back to the candidate experience. Like that's not a good candidate experience.
yeah,
You want to have relevant candidates for the roles. So yeah, it works both ways for sure.
yeah. And what do you think about, again, candidate from a candidate experience perspective, about having on-site interviews or online interviews?
So we operate a mixture of hybrid model and remote working. So I have the view of both sides. I think for certain roles, having that on-site interview really makes a big difference. Um, I wouldn't, I wouldn't, I mean, I really feel that's relevant for candidates who are at final stage, maybe. So
Yeah,
someone who's obviously invested a lot of time. They know you, they know your product. They've obviously been through a couple of interviews and they're at the final stage. I think at that point, that's the best time to offer someone. And when I say offer, like it's not mandatory, it's just a suggestion. People have lives, they have kids, whatever it may be. It might not be possible. That's also absolutely fine. But we always offer, if you would prefer, the final stage. We can do it in person. You can meet your potential new colleagues. You can see the environment, the office. You can see what the commute is like. So I think it almost helps them make a decision as well. And I think if someone is joining a company and they're making that decision, I think it's obviously an important decision, right? So
yeah,
I think it's almost like they we want them to be comfortable with the decision they're making.
yeah,
But again, it's not optional. It's not mandatory. It's optional. So it's whether they want to. And I would say 95% of the time, they love to come in and
yeah.
meet people. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it again also depends, I guess, also on the location where the role is based. Obviously, if you're in a different country,
Yeah.
whatever, then this might be a bit more difficult.
Of course.
But I think as well, it's important to have that like personal touch almost,
Yeah. Of course.
and kind of know where your future, your new chapter is going to be. When especially if you work in a hybrid model.
Yeah.
So I do agree. I think I think the initial 2 or 3 calls, depending on how many stages there are, could be done online.
Yeah.
Um, because I think you get also good understanding of everything. Having just like a very focused conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also more efficient and more doable because you don't have to take time off from your current role, for example, if you have to travel there, or it's just more efficient that you can squeeze in like a half an hour or an hour call between
Exactly.
your
It, it,
schedule.
it really depends on your circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. But then at the same time, I think it's really, really important before you actually hire someone that that person comes in, still gets, to take in where their office is, who the colleagues are, what's the environment like. And also for the company, right? Like, I think you also kind of get a better vibe of someone when you meet them in person.
Of
So I
course.
think it should definitely be a thing. It's just crazy to me, when I first when I started my career, I used to go for every initial conversation be on site. Like back then there was no
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
hybrid model. Everyone was like in the office 5 days a
Yeah.
week and you would
Until
come
COVID happened.
literally. And it's so funny. Like now I can't even imagine,
Uh-huh.
going for every interview. Imagine like all the interviews I do, like imagine being on site and people coming in and out. Like you wouldn't be able to have this many
Yeah.
interviews. So that
You need a lot of energy.
yeah, energy and time
Yeah.
because like I literally 90% of my time I sit in interviews. So I wonder like if this would be actually on site, I
Yeah.
would basically not be able to do anything but sit in this meeting room and have interviews all day long, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
I wonder if sometimes like back in the day that the time to hire was way longer. than it is now.
I
Um,
remember. I remember. This was ages ago now, 8, 9 years ago. I had to take off half a day to
mhm.
spend time on site for like 3 interviews.
Yeah.
I actually had to use annual holiday for interviews.
Yeah.
You think about it now, you're like crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Literally, literally. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, it has really changed a lot. So
yeah,
I guess we are already in the future of candidate experience in that sense.
yeah.
And, yeah, let's see what's gonna be changing even more within this. But yeah, what would you say, and this is my last question, what would be your top tip for companies to enhance the candidate experience in summary?
I think going back to what I said earlier, just around like transparency,
Mhm.
just be transparent with people, set expectations. What we've done recently is we've added the interview process to the job description, and
Okay,
even just adding that description there goes such a long way. Candidates already know what the process is going to be
that's such a good
before they
point.
even apply for the role. So it makes such a big difference of like setting expectations.
Mhm.
I think you can streamline hiring processes, especially if you're internal. Your stakeholders are your hiring managers. These are people and colleagues you work with.
Yeah.
After every successful recruitment, if possible, depending on workload, of course, um, it's always good to just realign with your stakeholder, understand what worked, what didn't work. Do you need to build, I don't know, a list of interviewers, like an interviewer pool of people
Mhm.
available? Do you need to think about holidays? Like, is the summer period coming up or is Christmas coming up? So just trying to work out the best time to launch roles and how to streamline them. And then I think just provide the feedback, right? Again, we mentioned it was the first thing we mentioned, just providing feedback with candidates, whether that's them going ahead to the next steps or even if it's just a rejection. Just even a one liner of this, we didn't decide to go ahead because of X reason goes such a long way.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Mert.
Thank
It
you.
was lovely talking to you. And yeah, all the best to you.
Speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.